Use a colored pencil? Yeah,
One, two.
I need a pen. I just have to have a pen.
You're on my side of the table. Here,
Yeah,
I'll get you your own pen. Here. You go to your side of the table. Hello,
Thanks.
everybody. Welcome. Glad you're here, hanging out with us on a Wednesday evening. We do, in fact, have a topic tonight. Joanna and I were having a sort of kind of debate. We did this video before, so I'm just going to say right from the start, if you're looking for a lot more information on on shrimp and on snails, I've got videos linked down in the description below, because we touched on this, like I said, we touched on this subject before in a video, but I thought it would be cooler to actually have more of a live discussion where you all can answer your questions and pipe in with your opinions, because we are going to debate what is better, shrimp or snails. Now, you've taken the shrimp side of things. I took
it right off the bat.
I'm going to take snails, but I just want to be clear right from the outset. When we're doing this, I am primarily thinking about mystery snails and nearite snails. I'm not really thinking about pond snails, ram's horn snails, Malaysian trumpet snails.
Good.
Some of those snails that people will find maybe not as inviting, maybe not as colorful. So that's kind of where I'm coming from the debate sort of thing that we're going to be doing a little bit later. And I can't wait to hear your opinions, suggestions, and questions about the subject, because it's going to be pretty cool. And I am sure you will bring up a lot of really great points as well. Some things that we'll probably miss, some things maybe we missed in the original video when we did it, but it's going to be awesome. Yep.
Before you carry on,
yeah.
Second Floor Aquatics, Shannon and Ryan, I got the package, and we now have our official Second Floor Aquatics shirts, which are the coolest ever.
We had to battle it out, because I'm like, well, do we both wear them? And she's like, no, but I'm wearing it. I'm like, fine, I'll wear this, and then next week or something, I'll wear mine. But it's the funniest shirt I've ever seen. As soon as you guys showed us those, I'm like, I need one of those. It was awesome.
We got the cutest little care package with lots of little goodies. Shannon, I have to know, did you paint this little box? Let's not tell him over here what's in there, because this is mine. He ate his Cheetos right off the bat.
I took care of the Cheetos instantly.
And so
Thank
cute.
You.
And then just want to show a few things. And some beautiful, beautiful rocks, including like agates. Thank you so much, Ryan. That's very nice. We're just stunned.
Thank you. Yes, it was quite awesome. Magnets on the fridge already. Just daily reminder. I'm like, oh man, I'm not having a second jelly donut. Toski says, don't bury the rhizome. Is that from today's video?
Well, you should know.
Well, I watched it, but you always tell me to watch things and turn down the volume. You're distracting me because you're working from home. So I tried to be considerate, but then when I do that, sometimes I miss certain parts.
Yeah.
So,
including like the coolest fact ever, that I included a super duper fact in there.
All right, so we'll get to that in a minute. So we'll continue that thought in a second.
I'm not saying it.
But as normal, let's start out with videos that happened this week. If you didn't see Sunday's video, check it out. The rummy nose rasbora. If you've never kept them, trust me, you're going to want to see this video. This is a fish that once you see it, it's a scientifically proven fact. 99.9% of people want that fish.
Whiplash.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just that cool. So I challenge you to watch that video, get done with the video, and not even just have a fleeting thought, I need this fish in my life. So rummy nose rasbora. Check it out if you haven't done it already. Today you did a video on
Anubias, the best plant ever.
Yep. So on the small scape, you did your Anubias video, which was pretty cool. Tomorrow we'll have a members video coming out, and then Sunday, you and I have got a video coming out. We're going to be teaming up for another episode of something on a Sunday. Yeah, how about that?
Fascinating.
So that's what's going on
wait.
there. Places we're going to be, things to see. Let's see here. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday, the 19th of February, we're going to be at the Quad Cities Swap in Davenport, Iowa. It's our first ever Quad Cities Swap.
So excited.
I'm crazy excited because all I hear is amazing things. This is the largest swap now in the Midwest. I'm really excited to check it out. And hopefully there are people there that we get to see that we don't normally see in this area. I'm going to be bringing all kinds of cool fish. Lots of really cool fish.
Yes.
The weekend after that, the 26th, is the GCCA swap in Northbrook. And then the weekend after that, Saturday the 4th, is the Greenwater Aquarius Society swap. That's in Tinley Park. Then on the 9th, I have to do this.
He does.
It's like,
all the time.
Calendar. On the 9th of March, something I'm really, really excited about, because I was just talking to
Mike.
Yep.
Mike.
Fish Barn Man. We are going to be, oops, I pressed a button and I don't know where that went. I just put a link in the chat here. We're going to be at the Motor City Aquarium Society. That's a Thursday. Now, he did mention that the location that they're normally at, and I've never been there, so I don't know where their normal location is, but wherever the location is going to be, it's probably going to be different because they're working some things out. There was some double scheduling. But on the 9th, it's a Thursday, Motor City, so that's in, I think it was Warren, Michigan, so close to Detroit. We're going to be there. I'm going to be doing a talk on intro to Lake Tanganyika and cichlids. So that's one that's similar to what I've done at the Aquashella. So if you've never been to an Aquashella and you hear me talking about it, like, oh, you've done a presentation, I sure would like to see that sometime. Well, if you're in the Michigan area or northern Indiana or part of Illinois or Ohio, maybe check it out. Come hang out with us. Be nice to meet you and say hello. So that's the things that are coming up in the near distance. Did I miss anything? Because then not shortly after that, there's a bunch more swaps and everything, because everybody wants to cram in one or two swaps at the end of the spring. So that's often what happens. Fun fact, if I start talking even faster than I normally do, or I seem a little strange, Eli and I went to the gym. Today, before I left for the gym, I said, what are we doing for dinner? And she said, I don't know. We'll probably have to pick something up because, live stream night, things get all crazy. So I said, okay.
I'll pick it up.
I said I was going to, I says, all right, I'll grab something.
And I said, okay. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then I'm like, oh, no, that's okay. I got to go to Jewel. I'll pick it up.
And I didn't hear that part because I don't think you said it. But anyway, we decided to make it a McDonald's night. Not that this channel's not sponsored by McDonald's in any way, shape, or form. So we get home. I start eating. Joanna texts, are you guys home yet? Yes. We just got home, stopped for dinner. She's like, I told you I was stopping for dinner. I'm waiting for our food. She also went to the same place. But then I got 2 pops.
Yeah.
And I'm not usually a 2-pop drinker. I usually stop after 1 pop, and now I've had 2.
And you look for more pop. You usually dip into my pop, which is so funny.
The caffeine has now fully hit. Your boy Jason's here in the house. It's prime time. That's right. Is really messing up my brain. So
just so you know,
yeah.
Rachel is here, and she's never been on a live stream before. So you
That's
know what?
a bad one to pick.
No.
You're getting me all caffeined out of my brain.
I'm sorry, Rachel.
About that. Trust me, next week it'll be possibly more normal, but I can't guarantee that.
And you know what Mary said?
What?
Mary said that she just binge watched the Smallscape.
Wow, that's cool.
That's really fun.
Those are minutes you'll never get back.
You will never get those minutes back. I'm so
awesome.
sorry. I
Thank
hope you
you
love Anubias as much as I do now.
Yep. Amisa says, yeah, double pop night. It's going to be good with your boy Jason. That's right. It is.
Oh, no. Mm-hmm. No.
Oh, yeah. It's, whew. I can already just feel my heart going like this. I'm not really big into caffeine. I don't drink coffee. I'm not like a huge tea drinker.
No, every once in a while, yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's get into this. Should we get into this? We have a debate. We have a conversation that we need to talk about here. Shrimp, snails. Some of you have kept one or the other. Some of you have kept both. Some of you are like, no, man, heck no. I'm not keeping these little tiny invertebrates. So the reason I wanted to talk about it is I just think that no matter which way you go, whether you go shrimp, snails, or both, can we just say they both add a lot of uniqueness to an aquarium? Mm-hmm. Especially for those of you who are new enough to the invertebrate lands, snails and shrimp, where you just recently added them and you're used to seeing fish swim around. There is something so unique about watching shrimp, watching snails move around the tank in a very, very different way. It just adds something so awesome to an aquarium. Now, I'm going to stay, like I said, I'm taking the side of the snails.
Okay.
And I think one of the awesome advantages of snails, one of the reasons why people get snails obviously is algae control. And the cool thing about snails, and now again, I'm kind of sticking with in my brain, I'm thinking mystery snails and nearite snails. The cool thing about these snails is you don't need a lot of space for them. So they're especially useful in that, I've got a 5-gallon tank or I've got a 10-gallon, and you're not even thinking about putting bristlenose plecos in there. Your clown pleco, yeah, maybe you can put that in a 10-gallon, that's fine. Otos are fine, but what if you've got harder water and maybe you've only got a 5 or 10-gallon, you need to keep a big group of otos, so it's like, well, that's out. What is going to eat the algae on the surfaces? Right? Your brown algae, your mushy green algae, even some of that harder, crusty algae. Well, those are your snails. Those are your mystery snails, and those are your nearite snails. So you're going to get all of that algae eating. And might I say, shrimp, generally speaking, at least the Neocaridina, don't eat a lot of algae off the glass, off of surfaces. At least not the slimy algae.
Okay.
Wouldn't you agree?
Sure.
Okay. Would you like to rebut my first statement?
Yes, I would. I think one of the biggest draws to getting shrimp is because they are so stinking tiny. They are adorable, and since they are so tiny, you can keep them in smaller tanks.
Smaller than a mystery snail, I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to state for the record that if you have a nearite snails stay smaller.
Yeah.
I don't think they're as active as mystery snails. And because of that, I think you can get very close to the minimum size tank that would still be comfortable for a nearite snail and shrimp.
Yeah, but shrimp are just fascinating to watch.
That is true, but I think you could make the same argument for snails. Don't you agree?
Probably.
I think they're both pretty awesome. I mean, all right, come on. Can we just all agree that when a snail, especially a mystery snail, decides to climb all the way up to the top of your tank, and then it sits there, and you know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
It knows what it's going to do. You know what it's going to do, and you can just see the look in its eye.
He's
and that
going.
little snail's like, I just spent 20 minutes climbing up the side of this tank with my big bulbous body, and now I'm going to let go.
Yep.
And when I do, I'm going to float all the way back down. And if you've got other mystery snails in the tank, they're all like, yeah, man, you're crazy. It's like just some crazy like X Games or something for those mystery snails.
Except if you have a rimless tank, it may not choose to go floating down.
It might just fall off the other end.
Just decide to keep going, and
like
then
a Humpty Dumpty.
Bye mystery snail. Shrimps don't do that.
Well, no.
They generally, I don't see them hopping out.
No, not
out.
as much. Okay, that's a good point. Shrimp are less likely to be found on the floor, especially if you have an open tank, an open top tank, a rimless tank, where it's like, all like these guys back here. In fact, I will concede the point that the mystery snails that we have here, you never exactly know which tank they are in. Now, luckily, we haven't found any just completely crawled out. Like they have enough sense in their microscopic little brain to be like, oh, there's no water on this side. I don't think they actually think that through. We've just been lucky. They will just go from tank to tank, and that's just what happens. Where, yes, I think it's true that for the most part, your shrimp are probably not going to just be like, I'm going for it. I don't care what's on the other side. I'm staying right in I'm leaving. Okay. However, and this is a point that I don't think people appreciate quite enough. If you're into breeding things, I think overall, shrimp are easier to breed, right? I mean, there's nothing really special you have to do. Like we primarily keep the Neocaridina, and they're all of a sudden you've got 6 or 8 of them, and next thing you know, you've got a female that's buried. She's got all the eggs under her little body, and then you've got the tiniest little baby shrimp. And there's not a whole lot that needs to be done except you've got good water parameters, and you don't have a filter that's going to suck up the babies.
Okay.
So the the snails are going to be a little bit harder to breed on purpose, although they're not hard, because our mystery snails, what they would do is they would climb up, they would lay their egg clutch, stick that to the top, the underside of the rim, or underside of the cover, and then that would keep them moist enough where the babies would hatch. But sometimes you have to put a little bit more effort in. However, that's not my point. So I actually just gave you...
Oh, I was just going to say, waiting for you to stop, because shrimp really don't leave messes.
Well, hold on. I'm not done yet. Because when it comes to breeding, generally speaking, you don't have to call mystery snails or nearite snails.
It's true.
Nearite snails are much harder to breed because they need brackish water. But the mystery snails, particularly, they tend to breed true, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got golds, you've got blues, you've got whatever, right? The magentas, they're going to leave more magentas. They're not going to just discombobulate. That's a scientific term. Please don't forget it. All the way back to some random tannish brown color. Where most of your Neocaridina, if you let them just go and you don't call and you're not paying attention, which by the way is not fun, right? Calling shrimp, even if you're not going to like do any bad things, like we don't like just call our shrimp and just toss them away. We usually put them in tanks with like bristlenose plecos because they do a really good job of cleaning up uneaten food and stuff. So we'll throw them in there. But it's a big pain sometimes when you've got hundreds and hundreds of shrimp in a tank. You're like, I need this little one here, and I need that. Oh, you're not looking so colorful, just to keep your cherry shrimp or your pumpkin shrimp or your yellows looking good. You don't have to do that with mystery snails. They just are pretty from day one, or at least breed true.
Yes, however, and mystery snails are very pretty. They come in a number of different colors, but I would have to say those colors are still quite muted compared to the beautiful colors of shrimp. Bright yellow, cherry red shrimp, blue dreams. I could just keep going and going and going. They're just beautiful, tiny little colors.
Well, and not only that, I'm going to give you another point. We didn't even get into the Caridina.
No.
Right? We didn't get into the really shrimp. We didn't get into any of those.
Yeah.
Taiwan bees. Those things are insane, right? I mean...
The striped one.
Yeah, when I did... So the last big shrimp tour thing I did was at Grant's, at his house. There were just so many very, very unique, just insanely colored shrimp. So,
yeah, I can't even imagine.
But that brings me to another point, and that is water parameters. I think as long as you're close in your water parameters with shrimp, and they've got cuttlebone, or they've got the shrimp food that gives them the calcium they need, they're somewhat forgiving of water parameters. I mean, you can't keep them in an acidic tank. No, you can't keep them in a GH and KH that's super low. The shells won't form properly. They're not going to survive all that well. But if you've got average water parameters, pH of around neutral, higher would be a little bit better, a little bit higher, a little bit better. Water that is moderately hard to hard water, your shrimp are going to do pretty well, right? When it comes, or I'm sorry, your snails. Your snails are going to do pretty well. Whew, snails.
Whew.
Your shrimp, however, that could be a different story, right? If you're keeping the Caridina or the Taiwan bees, maybe you're going to need water that is not quite so hard, or maybe the pH needs to be a little bit lower, so you have to be a little bit more careful with those. The Neocaridina, we keep those at a pH of 8 to 8.2, and the water hardness is 10 degrees GH and KH. But some other shrimp, they might be a little bit more finicky. Someone else mentioned, I don't remember who it was because I just briefly glanced over here, and they said the other cool thing is that shrimp will clean up after snails. And snails will clean up after shrimp.
They're good buddies.
So keep in mind, you can keep these bad boys together, and we do. In every shrimp tank, there is some type of snail.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine magenta mystery snails with yellow shrimp? That'd be popping.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Don't you think?
Yep. Oh, Davey. I don't like the fact that you said that.
What?
Because you're right. Read right there. It's true.
Neorites leave those eggs. Yes, they do.
So go ahead and repeat it for everybody to hear.
Davey brought up a great point. Neorites leave those eggs everywhere.
Yep.
They do.
I remember the first time I ever kept neorite snails. It was in a 20-gallon, and there was these white dots. And at first, I'm like, what the heck are these little... I didn't know what it was. And you'd go in there and you try to scrape it gently, and like, these things are not coming off. It's on the driftwood. It was on like the background. It was on the plants. It was all over the glass. I'm like, what is this? I don't like this. And then you learn, guess what? You've got neorite snail eggs everywhere. And so I personally prefer mystery snails compared. Now, we did a video, actually. I did a video, maybe it was us, I don't remember, where we compared mystery snails to neorite snails. I don't know if I linked that one in the description below. All the other snail and shrimp info's there. But that was one of the downsides to the neorites, is those white little crusty eggs. And I don't know, has anybody found a fish that eats them? I would love to hear from you in the chat. If you found any fish that will actually eat those white, hard nearite snail eggs, because I don't think I have.
Pretty cool.
What do you got? You want to share with the class?
Well, I have one basically for you, which I'll give you in a minute, and I've got another one for me. Another good thing, if you're talking mystery snail specifically versus shrimp. Shrimp are better for one reason. If you've got a very small little aquascape or even small little baby plants, you don't have to worry about your shrimp uprooting your plants. Mystery snails are kind of clumsy. They'll just trample right along your plants, and then frequently they'll uproot them, especially like microsword, maybe some S. repens that likes to pop up out of the soil. Just keep that in mind. Shrimp are tiny, and they just won't with their tiny little hands.
Well, that's a good point. And I think the other, I guess now we're just going to go free for all, because the other thing that you have to consider with snails is I maintain that snails don't eat healthy plants, but I also know that we keep a very limited kind of plant with most snails. So Anubias, Crips, Jungle Val, and I've never had them eat those plants. In fact, we used to put, and this is a good thing about the snails, is we could put plants covered in algae, and the snails in our breeding tanks would just completely devour the algae, but the plants would be fine. That being said, we don't really have a situation where we got a bunch of snails in with like maybe some really thinly leaved plants like swords or anything like that, unless they're just like pond snails, pest snails, and I haven't had a huge problem there. Where your shrimp, unless you all have experienced something different, I don't think we've ever had a situation where the shrimp are just absolutely consuming the ever-loving heck out of plants, right?
No.
And the other thing I would say that's an advantage for shrimp is some will eat that green hair algae, and I'm thinking Amano shrimp.
Yep.
All right, those are fantastic to have in a planted tank, because for those of you who wind up with green hair algae, you know, it's like, well, there are some fish that eat it. Florida flagfish love it. Sometimes mollies will eat it, but for the most part, it's like, well, I mean, obviously lots of different types of cichlids will too, but if you got a planted tank, you're limited there. But the Amano shrimp, I told this story, maybe it was last week or the week before. We had a few hundred Amano shrimp in a couple 10 gallons, and one of the 10 gallons had Java moss that was covered in green hair algae, and they cleaned that bad boy off, and all that was left was like just Java moss. It was really thin, and it didn't look so great because it was mixed in with so much green hair algae, but those Amano shrimp cleaned all of that off, and I was just throwing in chunks from other tanks, and within a few days, and that was a lot of Amano shrimp, they would just get rid of it all. So I found that the snails maybe don't do as good a job with the green hair algae, i.e. some would ignore it.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. Wish
Yeah.
they wouldn't. Wish you could hire them out.
Yeah.
Be like, take care of it. One big bonus for mystery snails, or really any of the snails, compared to shrimp, I would have to say is you don't necessarily have to worry as much that certain fish will be eating your baby snails as you would shrimp. You have to be very careful who you're putting in there, because your little shrimplets and maybe even shrimp will go bye-bye.
That's a good point. If fish are going to leave snails alone that are larger, they almost always leave the babies alone. I mean, we just have these big mystery snails. Sometimes I don't even realize that they laid a clutch somewhere, and all of a sudden you're like, what are all these dots? Like, oh, they're little baby mystery snails, and the vast majority of them survive, which I think brings me to another point. To me, at least, it's a little bit easier once the mystery snails hatch to just, you'll wind up losing next to none, where for us, sometimes you can get shrimp that are, sometimes something happens. Water temperature is a little bit off, you know, if you're filling the tank, or who knows, some small thing happens, and the next thing you know, you've lost some shrimp. But one major downside to snails, and this is a big one, that's something you should consider, especially if you're squeamish. When especially a mystery snail dies, and if you don't catch it right away,
That's not cool.
that will severely mess up your water quality. It'll turn your tank all cloudy. And sometimes it's kind of hard to determine if a mystery snail is just kind of chilling, or maybe it gets stuck behind a rock and it's just been back there if it's a larger tank and you don't really notice. Yeah, Chris, you've smelled the smell of the mystery snail. And I mean, you said too, oh, the smell. There are a few things in fish keeping that truly smell as bad as a dead mystery snail. And it's even worse when you pick up that shell out of the water.
I know it's coming. Don't say
The shell comes out, but the body, what used to be a body, just slurps right out of the shell and back into the tank. And you're like, now you're trying to get a net, but it's like, this is like jelly. And it's, and then once you get out of the thing, you're like, I think I'm going to put it back because the smell is horrendous. It's one of those things where if you've got mystery snails and they die, put it in like a grocery bag, really tighten that thing up and get it out of the house because it is going to only be worse. Yeah.
But I would like to counter. There is nothing sadder than a deceased little shrimp. I have seen a couple, literally, they'll just be laying on their side, deceased. It's one of the saddest things.
They gave up the ghost.
Gave up their, and not their like little exoskeleton, just their actual, they go bye-bye. It's so sad.
It is. It's pretty sad.
Just saying.
I think those are some points. Snails, are they easier to feed? I think so. I think snails are more or less indiscriminate eaters. It's not true that they eat fish poop. I don't know of many organisms that do that. Snails don't. They will scavenge, and so they'll eat uneaten fish food, even the stuff the other fish are like, this has been down here for a while. The snails are like, I don't really, especially like Malaysian trumpet snails, if we're getting into like the ones that don't die. And if we want to go that direction, I would also say Malaysian trumpet snails are the single most hardy aquarium pet that you can have.
That's not a bonus.
Well, it is if you like living things and you're just like, hey, you know what?
It's a negative.
I just want something that is going to live through tornadoes. I'm not kidding you. I told this story before, but we cleared out a tank that had Malaysian trumpet snails, and I kept the substrate. It was gravel. Put it in a 5-gallon bucket, put it in the garage. That bucket was there for probably, might have been close to a year, 9 months, a year. And I think that there was still water-ish kind of towards the bottom, like the gravel might have still been moist, like halfway down. I used some of that gravel, filled up the tank, and within probably 24 hours, I'm like, what the heck? There were Malaysian trumpet snails. Like, hey, this is great. Remember when, it's been a while, but this is pretty fun. Short of like an asteroid, cool. I don't really know if those things ever deceased themselves. Yeah, I mean, so they are. They're the cockroach of the snail world. That is absolutely true. When this world, if something bad ever happens, there will be cockroaches and Malaysian trumpet snails battling it out for world domination. Yeah.
How scary. Melanie's here.
Sweet. What's up?
Melanie. She said they look like little cooked shrimp. They do. They do. All you would need, and I think I have it. I have little tiny miniature mugs. I must have somewhere a little miniature plate. Wouldn't that be with little silverware, a little cooked? Never mind.
Yeah. I think one other thing, and that is if you're looking for a variety, like true variety, and you can only keep one. And again, the nice thing is you can keep two. I mean, you can keep them both. You're going to get more variety out of the shrimp, right? You mentioned that with the colors, but not just the colors in terms of, what are your water parameters? So if you've got water parameters that are on the softer side, and maybe the pH is sub 7, starting to get into the acidic side, there are shrimp for you. If you've got a pH that's a little bit on the higher side, the water hardness is a little bit more, there's shrimp for you. Where the snails, for those shells to form properly and to be healthy, they do need some water hardness. They do need some calcium. They do a little bit better when the pH is a little bit higher, and so it's just something to consider. Again, now Malaysian trumpet snails, I don't really think they care. Sometimes I don't even think they need water. It's like if you just put them in liquid. Like, yep, I kept my Malaysian trumpet snails in a bottle of Sprite, and they just blew up on me, man.
Can you imagine?
What I will say with the Malaysian trumpet snails is I like the fact that, and for the most part, when the lights are on, as long as they're not absolutely insanely overpopulated, they do burrow. And in the bristlenose breeding tank, it's weird because if you look really closely, I remember the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh no, are there a bunch of worms in that tank? I kind of glanced at it, not realizing, it's all the mystery, it's all the Malaysian trumpet snails, and they got the little things sticking up out of the substrate. And then after I fed the tank, I'm like, oh, there they are.
There they are.
But I have found with the Malaysian trumpet snails, one of the easiest things to do, especially if your tank is not planted, is just take a net and just scoop them all out. The sand falls out, and you'll have 16 pounds of Malaysian trumpet snails for dinner. Don't eat them. I don't know where they've been. Yeah. You got anything more you want to say? Or can we start answering some sweet
No,
questions?
I want to answer some sweet questions
Okay.
because Suzanne says that she picked up 6 green neons.
Sweet?
Yeah. They look like my cardinals. Yes. Will they color up when they get bigger? Well, kind of. They will get bigger, and of course the little color on their body will get a little larger as well. So they will color up a little bit more, but I would have to say cardinals are can be a little bit maybe more striking because it does have like the red in there, but they're just not as cool as green neons.
That's debatable.
Because green neons, just look at them from different angles. You're gonna see some purple, you're gonna see some blue, maybe some turquoise. It's just all that wonderfulness and just those little tiny bodies.
We've got right now, with this last shipment, I brought in green neons, and there are many hundreds in a 37-gallon tank, and they are very, very striking.
It's like a light show.
Yeah, I mean, with the blues and this bluish greens, they are incredibly striking. Now, I will say, if you keep them on a lighter substrate, so if you've got a tan or a white substrate, maybe you don't have a background on your tank, or it's a lighter background, they might not get that dark. I think that's why ours are showing such amazing color, and they did that like 10 minutes after I put them in the tank. Black gravel, black background, and it's like, bam, check me out.
But the one time that we did have the green neons with that very light substrate, I kind of liked it. It's not,
Yeah,
they don't
but
look
they
as
weren't-
good,
yeah.
but they do still look, it's more like little gemstones. If you have that light substrate, it was a different look, not as striking, but I still liked it anyways.
Steve's
Just
got a
saying.
great question. Is a column tank appropriate for shrimp? Absolutely. As long as, so I'm thinking like we had the 15-gallon column tank, and what you did in the center is you had that big piece of wood, and you had like the Anubias kind of
Yeah.
glued to it. They're going to use that vertical space. So unlike fish, and by the way, shrimp would too, a column tank is perfectly appropriate for snails, I meant.
Snails.
Snail. Shrimp, snails, shrimp. I get them confused.
Oh.
Remember, way too much caffeine. My brain's, I'm like that chipmunk from
Oh,
the
no.
movie Hoodwinked. Like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, we haven't seen that in a long time. And He
Yeah.
was funny. He wasn't a chipmunk, though.
Yes, he was.
No, he wasn't.
Oh my gosh, yes, he was. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, yeah, the column tanks for both snails and shrimp, especially for the shrimp, if you build that up, heck yeah, they will love it.
I think it was a squirrel.
No, it wasn't a squirrel. It's a chipmunk. Fish fan 20-gallon long, what's up? Dale says hi. I now have 2 baby cherry barbs. Wow, that's cool. I'm so excited. Have you done a video on hatchet fish? Wondering if marble or silver would work in a shrimp 10-gallon tank. I have not done a video on them. I love hatchet fish. I've had them many, many times in the last 40-something years. And I remember that was one of the first fish. I just thought they were so cool as a kid. When we got our 20-gallon, at that point I might have been 8, 9 years old. And that was one of the first things I wanted, is we had a group of silver hatchet fish in that 20-gallon. Marbles stay smaller. 10-gallon, they might be okay. I'd probably prefer them in a 20-gallon long. I think they would leave... Wait, do we have a question? Oh, no, you were saying cherry barbs. Oh, yeah, shrimp 10-gallon. Probably. I mean, there's always a chance that fish are going to eat the shrimplets because they're so tiny. But they spend so much time at the top of the tank, and your shrimp aren't going to spend a lot of time there unless they're hooking on the underside of duckweed or something, or they're up there in like hornwort. But most likely they would probably leave most of them alone.
We've
Oh
got
my
many
gosh.
votes for
Suzanne
squirrel.
says, Jason, do you bite your straws?
I saw that. Yes, he does.
I think it makes the pop taste better. I'm sorry. I'm not going to drink out of it anymore because it's probably like people are like, what the heck is wrong with a straw? I don't, am I the only one? And maybe if you've never tried this, you're going to learn something new, especially McDonald's straws. If you just bend them over, I don't know what it is, but it makes the pop taste so much better. It just does. Steel Waves, thank you so much for the super chat. Howdy. Thinking of Scarlet Baddest for my 3-gallon bookshelf.
Yeah.
Do you still have your pair, and was it a good size for them? Don't have the pair anymore, and thought it was
No.
a very good size.
It was a good size.
Yep. If you had a pair, I mean, so for those who are like, 3 gallons, that's not appropriate. It's a bookshelf tank. So these bookshelf tanks are quite long, and you wouldn't think like a 3-gallon would be nearly big enough for anything. But we've had Endlers in a 3-gallon long, because that 3-gallon long, if I recall, was like it was as long as a 10-gallon. It wasn't very wide. I think it was only maybe 4 or 5 inches wide, 4 or 5 inches tall, maybe
Something
6
like that.
inches tall. But it was like 20 or 22 inches long. So those bookshelf tanks, Thank you, Melanie. Twitchy the squirrel.
Thank you.
Oh, wait.
Oh, yeah, Melanie.
Are you sure it wasn't a chipmunk?
See,
Twitchy the
I
chipmunk?
already told you. Many people have already counted and said
Keith,
it was a squirrel. Yeah,
Keith. You gotta get a better,
That's right.
better bad guy name. Yeah.
That was the best.
Hold on, I lost it. Andy says, "What are you bringing to the Quad City swap? Nothing on the website. Nothing yet. I always wait until about 3 or 4 days before the swap, before I load up the website and put the inventory up. I just want to make sure everything is really looking awesome, and that I have a really good handle on what we're bringing. However, I will say we've got a bunch more rummy nose rasboras, but they're smaller than the ones I normally bring. They came in smaller, but I also got a better mix of males and females, and lots of different types of rainbows. We got the Bosmani, we have the red rainbows, we have the Kurumoy, and there was one other one that's, I can't remember. Siamese algae eaters, I've been wanting to bring those in for a long time. We've got those. Miro rasboras, red line rasboras, orange rice fish, different types of shell dwellers, blue dream shrimp. I mean, there's going to be a bunch of stuff. Green neons, lots and lots. Oh, and then the Nichols mouth brooder, the cichlid. Really, really cool and unusual. Haven't seen those in a...
Yeah.
Those are hard to come by. So it's going to be cool. Cool stuff.
Hammer Down Aquatics. Hey, could I put rummy nose tetras with rummy nose rasbora? Plan on putting them on a 20 long.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool. Yes.
I do.
That
be
would be really cool. I like
Dragon,
that idea.
Thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think if a baby betta was raised with snails, it would be less likely to attack them? Yeah. We kept full-grown bettas with snails. And I know for some of you it didn't work. And I get that. I don't want to discount that, because there are some people who tried putting mystery snails with bettas, and the betta just was relentless with the mystery snail. But we have done that combo when you had the Nano Nook and you had all those bettas. Mm-hmm. Now we did this a little bit differently. The mystery snails in I think in almost every case went in first. So we put the mystery snail in there. This was when you had the 2.5s and the 5s and all those little nano tanks. So we throw the mystery snail in there, and then usually later that day or the next day, the betta went in. And never, not once, I do not remember a single time, and we did this dozens of times. It wasn't like we tried it once or twice. We're like, oh, yep, it's going to work just fine. Literally dozens of times, and never had a problem, not a single issue. That being said, I know people who've been like, yeah, I tried it once and it was a disaster. Maybe it was because the mystery snail was in there first, but it was a good combo for us, always.
How about Amber wants to know can I add Galaxy Rasbora to a 6-gallon shrimp tank, and how many?
Yeah, I think so. Again, your shrimplets with full-grown Galaxy Rasboras, you might lose a few, but it's not going to be like overwhelming.
Give them lots of cover at the bottom.
It is a 6-gallon, so that's not a huge tank, but I would go with at least 6 to 8 to start with. If you've got Java moss or some areas where there's a lot of plants, a lot less likely you're going to lose those baby shrimplets. But the combo will work. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, have some botanicals at the bottom, or like some really tiny leaf plants like Nubius nana petite would be really fun.
I see Whip saying Lavo. Your recent video made me want the rummy nose rasboras, thinking of doing a community with them, also with honey grammies and panda cories. That would be a great combo. In fact,
that would be stunning.
Tank that I showed, we had the rummy nose rasbora, we had panda cories in there, we had a random variatus platy.
Yeah.
We had microtinopoma. Those need to leave. Learn something. See, this is keeping fish a long time.
Never works out well when you give me fish. Never.
I didn't give you.
Well, I inherited them.
Yes, that's true. So the microtinopoma, Angorsii and Sorgai, I don't remember. I think it's Angorsii. This is a fish that is known to be a micropredator. Beautiful fish. If you go back and look at like part 4 or 5 of the last fish room tour I did, these fish are outstanding. And they've been in this tank, and there were variatus platies in there, there were cory cats in there, everybody got along. The microtinopoma got along well with one another. You hear all these reports that they don't like one another. Never had an issue. They look fantastic. Put the rummy nose rasboras in there. I'm glad I filmed that, and just full disclosure, I'm glad I filmed that when I did, because I would try to film that a few days later, and all of a sudden it's like, what's going on with the fins? Turns out the microtinopoma love the orange tips. Something's setting them off. The orange tail fin, those tips that are orange, they think that must be something, some kind of food source, because now we've got some of those rummy nose rasboras. It's like, oh, great. So that's going to take a while to grow back. So Joanna's got to get them out of there. We've got another tank for them.
Stinkers.
And that's why I always say, have a backup plan for stuff. That is not something I anticipated at all, because the rummy nose rasbora is a big fish. They're fast enough. They're much faster than the microtinopoma, but because the microtinopoma, like I said, they're micro predators. They move almost like the leaf tinopoma. They're fairly slow movers, but you put 12 or 15 rummy nose rasboras in a tank like that, and you've got 4 microtinopoma that are now hiding out in all those leaves and that structure that you built. They're doing what they do. So time for them to move to another tank where they will be not picking on stuff.
JK Fishkeeping says, will you guys be selling the rummy razzles this month? Love that, rummy razzles. Isn't that cute?
Was that?
Rummy rasboras, rummy razzles.
Heck yeah, we'll have them. We've got a bunch.
Isn't that cute? I'm going to call them that. I'm going to steal that. Thank you very much. I'm going to call them that from now on, rummy razzles. That's fun. And then another one here, question for me from Mario. What do you think? What do I think about PetSmart top fin tissue culture plants? Just purchased some roseofolia and the top fin plant bulbs. Okay, PetSmart. I would say the only tissue culture plants that I typically get at my PetSmart, they're all different, but the ones that I usually find there are Bacopa, and sometimes I can get some little crypts. They turn out really great. Love it. I've had great luck with them. I really, really like tissue culture plants at Petco. If you have a Petco, you'll get different ones. They come in a little cup, and that's where I get the Nubius gold coin, the most beautiful little miniature plants you've ever seen. They do get bigger, but they're really, really cute. And what else? That's pretty much the main ones. But yeah, I've had good luck with them. So.
All right, I got a few in a row I want to answer. So Muffin says, thoughts on glow light danios and a nearite snail or two in a 10-gallon, currently trying to find something cool to put in my 10.
Yeah.
Probably.
Glow lights are cool.
I mean, danios can always be a little bit picky at things, but it's something I would probably try. Let's see. J6 says, am I still interested in the electric blue cars? Absolutely. When I see you at Greenwater, everything we talked about still applies. Bring them on in. Joe says, brown algae on the inside of a tank and glass, best fish. Depends on the size of the tank. If it's small, again, it's like a 5 or a 10-gallon community tank. Your mystery snails, your nearite snails are both good options. As you get into 20-gallon tanks, or even a 10-gallon, you could do a clown pleco. As you get into larger than 10-gallon tanks, a big group of otos. If you've got at least a 20-gallon bristlenose plecos, will eat that. But those are my main go-tos. If it's just brown algae and it's not the blackbeard algae. Dave from Iowa says, let's hit 200 likes. Dave from Iowa speaks.
Hey,
Dave, hope you're doing well.
Yeah.
By the way, thanks for all the moderators. Dave, I see Whip. I see Oink is here. Might have missed a couple. I don't know if I saw Wendy. I can't remember.
I don't
But
think
thank you.
I saw
Glad
her.
you guys are here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys are the best.
Hold on. There was one more. Where did it go? The whole chat thing just jumped all over the place. Gabe says, wait, you sell fish only at swaps. So, yeah, we only sell fish at swaps. Like I said at the beginning, we've got the Quad Cities on the 19th, GCC the week after that, Greenwater the week after that, and then there's about a month break. But we don't ship fish or anything like that. It's just we can barely keep the fish in with the swaps. And we both have regular full-time jobs. So shipping fish is not something we ever want to get into. If you are looking for fish online, similar to what we sell, flip Aquatics, because
they're the best.
We have a lot of crossover in terms of the types of fish that we are interested in. Tesla Killdozer 739. Thank you for the super chat. Enjoying the stream tonight. I'm glad you're here. Glad you guys are all hanging out with us.
Tom says, will yellow tail ACI be okay with yellow labs and rusties in a 90?
Oh, that's going to be cool. Absolutely. Yeah, the ACI get pretty big. So out of the Mbuna, the ACI get really big. The bumblebee cichlids get big, but the ACI tend to be relatively mellow, along with your yellow labs and your rusties. Yeah, I mean, your dominant male, your dominant ACI might want to push some of the other fish away when they're breeding. So if you've got like a male or a couple males and 3, 4, 5, 6 females. I don't know what your breakdown is going to be, but if that happens, sometimes when they're breeding, they've got their little spot. He's going to be a little bit more aggressive, but then once they've done what they need to do, they tend to chill out. I actually had that combination in my 75 gallon and don't recall ever having any issues. But yeah, that's a great combo because you'll get the blue in the ACI, you have the yellow and the yellow labs. The rusty cichlids have that purplish brown, so it's a nice combo. I like it. Oh, that's a good question, Mel. Who is going to be the most advantageous for the health of the ecosystem? Shrimp or snail? A combo of both. Do they have similar jobs?
Well, I mean, for your high-end aquascapes, how many want the mono shrimp?
Yeah,
I mean,
mono shrimp are outstanding. I love the question. I would say both. I think they complement one another very, very well. Especially if you've got a breeding tank for shrimp, the fact that those snails are going to constantly scour the surfaces of driftwood and the glass, and so you've got them taking care of that kind of algae, more like the brown algae we just talked about, or that softer green algae. Shrimp are interesting in that they form a big pile over food, but as they're doing that, sometimes you'll see like little food bits kind of going everywhere, and once that settles, if it settles, your snails are going to come and clean that up too. And just like if you've got pieces of things that kind of fall in between, like if you've got dragonstone or Seiryu stone, and you've got these cracks and crevices, a lot of your smaller shrimp, they get in there and they eat that stuff up too. If you've got Malaysian trumpet snails, they will, like I said, they will sometimes go on the substrate, and so they keep that kind of stirred up a little bit. They can be a little problematic, and so one of the things I don't necessarily, you got to be really careful, is if you wind up with a Malaysian trumpet snail infestation, in other words, the population's getting out of control, and you have a shrimp breeding tank, that becomes not ideal, because then any food that was falling to the bottom that you're trying to feed to the shrimp, now they're competing with the Malaysian trumpet snails, and then they're getting their fill. So once that happens, then the solution to that is start using food that you can put on like the shrimp lollies, where they're kind of suspended, and then that cuts down on that a little bit, but that's the only potential issue there. Michelle, thank you so much for being a member the last 8 months. Really appreciate it. Survived by cockroaches, Malaysian trumpet snails, and ants. Survival by, XL driftwood, double soaked in boiling water. Skin began to crawl when I saw 2 huge ants crawling around in the tank. Ugh. Yeah, I can understand that. That's almost as bad as the bamboo shrimp, which, by the way, I'm never getting those again.
I want the flower shrimp. I really do, with their little.
That's fine. They probably wouldn't crawl around as fast as
no.
With those bamboo shrimp.
Whew.
Can we agree? That just no.
Well, if like crawling
they're cool.
on your.
If you've got it, you know how interesting they are with their standing there and just kind of picking stuff out of the water column, but they crawled on me once. I will never forgive them for that. Just can't. I can't do it. It's not in me. Jamie says, do you have experience with imported Neocaridina shrimp? If so, what is the normal loss ratio after acclimating to the established tank? My water is significantly different than the store. Not a lot of experience, no. That would be a question you would ask Rob from Flip Aquatics, because they do that. They deal with shrimp in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, I'm sure in the millions every year. The only experience I have was the Amano shrimp that I brought in the past, and that was really hit or miss, but I am not a shrimp expert, and so I probably took losses that, like a Rob from Flip Aquatics would have never taken. I took more losses than I would have liked, and I stopped bringing them in after trying it a few times, because the combination of quite honestly, my lack of experience bringing in large volumes of shrimp and then having to deal with problems. Like if I bring in a bunch of fish, if I bring in thousands of fish and there's a problem, I have a pretty good understanding, just based on the way they're behaving, based on what I'm seeing, or if they're eating, not eating, their behavior, their activity level. I have an idea of what direction to go, but shrimp, I don't have that experience as much. So Tracy says, do Amano do good in your water parameters? they did okay. I don't think that was necessarily the issue, but again, I think that they came in with some issues. When I sent pictures to Grant, I sent pictures of Grant at one point, Garden of Eden, and he said, yeah, you've got an issue going on there. And by the time I was getting ready to do what he said, I had already lost most of them. So, Whip, member for 4 months, plus probably another year and a half or 2 years.
It's the worst.
Jason, long-time listener, first-time commenter. You always are. What's the best algae-eating pleco for a big New World cichlid tank? Are some better than others? Yeah. I mean, as you know, the common pleco one gets massive, and once they get probably 7, 8, maybe 10 inches, they pretty much stop eating algae. They just become bottom scavengers. From what I can remember, you don't have any really massive, like, I'm going to devour anything in the tank. Like, I don't think you've got any dovii or the bigger, huge, peacock bass or anything. If you don't have those types of fish, and it's more like, okay, I've got maybe some Oscars. I know you've had arowana in the past. The full-grown male bristlenose plecos are going to max out right around 6 to 6.5 inches. They get fairly wide. They're not stupid fish, and that's one of the things I like about bristlenose plecos. If they sense that they're, at least in my experience, and I keep them in every single one of my tanks, but in the tanks where there are more aggressive fish, you don't see them during the day. You don't see them when the lights are on. Although, they must be doing something, because when I would put food in at night, and that's how you deal with that, it would be gone the next morning. So they are coming out at night, especially like in the Mbuna tanks, although now they're out all the time. In some of the larger, like I had the Midas cichlids, which I would consider to be fairly large, fairly aggressive. They didn't come out when the Midas cichlids were awake, but they would come out at night, and the tanks would look good. So I like those. I don't keep a lot of the really expensive ones. We've got some snowball plecos. We've got some blue phantoms. We've had what was the other ones that we had? Oh, no, I can't remember. Besides the bristles, I don't know, but we don't keep a lot of the other types of plecos.
Zebra pleco would be pretty cool. I just have to say that.
It would be cool.
Right now, I'll just keep my little stuffed animal, but...
There you go. I think that's a better solution, because last thing I want to do is drop hundreds of dollars on a fish that's like, hey man, I'm not coming out. All right, Reggie says it was a squirrel, not a chipmunk.
Right.
Okay, fine. I will.
Yeah, everybody says it's a squirrel.
It was a squirrel, but squirrels
are very twitchy.
Yeah,
normally,
but so are chipmunks. They're like freaky.
Yeah, but he's bigger like a squirrel.
All right,
it's not a chipmunk.
Fine.
It's not Alvin.
I will reprogram my brain. Hoodwinked was a chipmunk, not a squirrel, or a squirrel, not a chipmunk.
Do you know that Alvin and Chipmunks, the album, was like one of the all-time, if not the all-time greatest selling album of all time?
I believe it, because when I was a kid,
I remember that.
I liked it.
Yeah.
I think I had it. Bruce says, what is the best way to eliminate a pest snail infestation? Well, there's a few things you can do. You can, one is control your feeding, right? So make sure that not a lot of food is hitting the substrate. And it can be a little bit difficult if you're trying to feed cory cats or you've got shrimp. That can be a little bit problematic, but you do the best you can of trying to limit the amount of food that falls to the bottom so the snails don't have as much to eat, less likely to reproduce in high numbers. Second thing is you find some way to remove them. I've done videos. I think you did a video on snail traps that we have used. The one that used to be the Sera, S-E-R-A snail trap, was the best one ever. I talked to them numerous times. For some reason, they can't get it back into the United States. I don't know what's going on, but when I did that video on that snail trap, people thought I somehow gathered up hundreds of snails and somehow pushed them in the snail. It was like the whole thing was packed, and it got rid of my snails within probably 2 times of using that. Wow. But they do have snail traps that you can use. You could throw in a gel-like food like rapashi or cucumber and just let them all kind of gather up there in a big mound and scoop them out. So it's kind of a manual thing. There are fish. You just kind of mentioned the assassin snail. Keep in mind, and a lot of people say, well, if you use assassin snails to get rid of pest snails, you've just exchanged one type of snail for another. That's partially true, but the assassin snails, I feel, don't grow in the quantities that you would see with most of your pest snails, ram's horn snails, or even Malaysian trumpet snails. 2, they do like to burrow like Malaysian trumpet snails, so they're not as visible. 3, they look cool with that yellow and black, so that's kind of cool. A lot of loaches. Most of your cichlids will eat snails. Dwarf chain loaches if you've got smaller tanks. You've got clown loaches if you've got larger tanks. The red-tailed botillas, the tiger loaches. Like I said, the vast majority of your cichlids, if you've got large tanks, we used to feed snails to our silver dollars, bala sharks, tinfoil barbs, all really, really enjoyed them. Our severums would go crazy for snails. Electric blue acara love to eat the snails.
Pea puffers, obviously.
Pea puffers, very good. Yeah.
My killer, Batis asamensis.
Yep.
Loves snails.
Loves
This
snails,
little,
and then so
close
does
little
the
treat.
was that
Nanochromis
splendens.
yeah.
It's a great little cichlid.
Mm-hmm.
They eat them too. So those are all ways you can mix and match or try to pick something that best fits your aquarium.
Whips World says, thanks for becoming a primetime primate partner, Whips World. And then Whips World said, why thank me?
I'm glad.
You didn't get the question from Stanley Nerdbuckle yet, did you?
I don't recall that.
Okay. My panda cories have been breeding in my community tank and the fry are surviving. When do they usually start joining the adult group? I have to in my lifetime see baby panda cories, any kind of baby cories. I have to.
Well,
be the cutest thing of all time.
So I don't know about the pandas, but I know the albinos that we had, they kind of hung out when they were that big. Like they would start hanging out. So maybe 3/8 of an inch, 3/8, certainly smaller than a 1/2 inch. They started hanging out with them. So I didn't know we did have pandas babies as well, about the same size.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Next time we do, can you make a note? Let me know.
Megan says, can you keep assassin snails with shrimp? I haven't tried to do that. I've always just kind of assumed I don't trust the assassin snails. However, the shrimplets are so fast, right? So as soon as an assassin snail will get close to a shrimplet, that thing just takes off. Even if it's only a few inches, it would take the assassin snail a while to catch up.
And the shrimp likes to clean the snail, even like the assassin snails, I believe. Like to keep them nice and tidy.
More experience with the combo, like, I tried that and all my shrimp went missing. But I don't remember that happening. Like, I don't remember a big difference when assassin snails have been in the tank.
All right, this is a stocking question. We have to make a choice.
Uh-oh.
You ready?
Yeah.
This is from Melanie. Big school of tiger barbs versus 5-line barbs for my new 30-gallon Blackwater scape. I can't decide.
I go 5-line all day.
I knew you were going to say 5-line. I knew
because the tiger barbs, especially in a 30-gallon, oh my gosh, those tiger barbs, you're probably going to get, like, realistically, and with especially with the tanks that you like to scape, maybe you get 10 or 12 of them in there, and they're smaller, and then they're going to get big, and then they're going to start killing each other, and it's going to be a mess. Where the 5-lines are not as bad. What else could you do? A little bit more
neighborly?
Yeah, I would go with the 5-lines. Or even the checkerboards for that matter. But those
checkerboards would look super sweet.
Oink's been a member for 16 months. Thank you. In baby shrimp, pleco, snail, nursery tank. Okay, so we got baby shrimp, plecos, snail, nursery tank. Would utilizing a breeder box for the snails and wood for pleco, noshing be overkill. I want to be a good mom. Let's see, a breeder box for the snails. I don't know if you really need to separate. I don't think you need to separate the snails. I mean, if you're just hatching them out in there and you want to leave them in there for a while, that's cool. But I don't think that the only thing you really have to even wonder about would be the plecos, but it's a nursery tank, so I'm assuming that your plecos are probably pretty small too. So I think they would all just get along fine. I don't know. Some people have said that you can't keep plecos and shrimp together in tanks because, at some point you wind up with one of the populations decreasing, but I haven't found that to be true either. We've always bred in fact, our super red bristlenose 20-gallon, we've always had a big, healthy group of shrimp in there, and the shrimp have stopped, the plecos have stopped breeding recently, or probably in the last year or two, but when they were breeding like crazy, we always had a big group of both. So wood's great. So for the bristlenose plecos won't necessarily eat the wood, but they'll eat all the slime off the wood and all the biofilm and everything. So they might eat a little bit of wood, but it's not like they need it, right? They don't absolutely require it like some other types of plecos do. All right, let me see here. What are you doing over there, young lady? Ooh, Katie says, what can I do about my aquarium smelling? Also, when buying online, say from eBay, fish, snails, etc., do they need to be treated with anything before adding them to the tank? Parasites, worms, etc. Okay, so let's look at the first question, smelly tanks. I did a whole video on smelly tanks, so just type in fish tank smells, primetime aquatics. That video will come up, so you'll get a little bit more thorough explanation in the video. But I start from the outside in. I look at the rim of the tank, make sure there's no food rotting, especially like where you feed. Then you put the lid down, and sometimes that gets wet. And if you got food, you find out the hard way if you're cleaning your tank and you get some of that food, like some of you get it on your arm or on the side of your hand. You're like, oh my gosh, it basically smells like sewage on your arm. So that's always fun. Trust me, you'd rather just be having an arm covered in duckweed at that point.
Pretty much.
So check the rim, check your filter, just make sure that there's no food rotting. Make sure that there's no any type of dead fish. If there's dead fish in the tank, can sometimes cause that to smell, or like we talked about earlier, dead snails. Make sure that you don't have an abundance of uneaten food in the substrate, so gravel vacuuming, especially if it's a non-planted tank, getting out the fish waste and the food, that will certainly help. If you have sand or even gravel sometimes, and especially if you've got some food that has decayed and is rotting in that substrate, the first time you disturb that substrate, sometimes that will release a sulfur smell that can be objectionable. Sometimes it's the food that you're feeding. So I told this story a month or two ago. New Life Spectrum has a very solid line of food, but unfortunately on a lot of their pellets they put too much garlic, or at least more garlic than I am willing to deal with. Because if your food has garlic, and that's mostly there as an immune booster and to help fish, encourage them to eat, but you start throwing that in multiple tanks, and our whole fish, it stunk. It was horrible. I mean, the worst. It started stinking up the house. I mean, it was like permeating from you'd walk in the door and be like, oh my gosh. I was like, it got to the point where like, we got to do something about this fish room because it's starting to stink up the house. Well, it wasn't the fish room itself. It was the fact that we were feeding this garlic infused food to 70 or 80 tanks. Obviously, if you've got less tanks, it's not going to smell as bad, but just be aware. I mean, does your fish food actually have a scent, a garlicky scent? That can be something as well. Now, in terms of when you're buying online, it doesn't matter where I'm buying fish from, whether it's online, pet store, get it from a swap. Best friend's had it in his tank for 50 years and everything is fine. Everything that I get is going into a quarantine tank, and they're staying there for 4 weeks, and the only way they're getting out of that quarantine tank is if they've been in that quarantine tank healthy, disease-free. I haven't had to treat it for 4 weeks. And then it goes into my main tank because I'm not willing to risk having a disease outbreak in my existing tank. So quarantine. Now, even in quarantine, am I treating the fish with anything? Not usually. So I know that, sometimes people put in antibiotics and general cure and ick meds and stuff, but I am a firm believer and nothing is ever going to make me not think this way, because I teach microbiology, that antibiotic resistance, even antiprotozoal resistance, is a thing. It is happening, and it is a serious problem. And the drugs that we put in an aquarium, those resistant microbes, even if they're not impacting the fish, can eventually leave that aquarium, wind up in the environment. Some of these microbes have the ability to exchange genetic information via plasmids, and they exchange that genetic information, those plasmids, with microbes that do infect fish, or even worse, infect human beings. And then we wind up with drug-resistant microbes that could be impacting a lot more than just aquarium fish. So because of that, if the fish are not showing any obvious signs of disease, I'm not treating them. If they're not eating properly, if they look skinny when they come in, and keep in mind now we're also dealing with very large volumes of fish on our end for the last over a year or so. Yeah, if they come in skinny, if they're not eating, if they're really looking like they're not healthy, I'll usually wait a day. Obviously, if you see any spots, any evidence of fin rot, yeah, those fish are getting medicated relatively quickly, because the faster you jump on it, in the long run, the less meds you have to use. but I don't medicate them unless there is a specific problem. The meds we keep on hand all the time are some of the Fritz meds. Miracin Oxy, I like that a lot. It's a liquid. It tends to deal with a lot of the external white patches, the non-ick related external parasites. Miracin 1, Miracin 2, which is a powder. For ick, it's usually going to be some combination of Copper Safe. We've used recently the Fritz Fix Ick, and then Ick X. I love those. If I've got a really bad ick problem, the Copper Safe goes in, and I'll worry about beneficial bacteria and all that stuff later, because number one job is getting the ick taken care of. And then we've got, for the internal stuff, we've got Paracleanse and Expel P. I like that combination of levamisole and metronidazole. But those are my must-haves. I have to have those in the fish room at all times. But I don't use them unless I need them. Hi.
DO8 betta in a 3-gallon, in a planted 3-gallon. It's anything over 2.5 is acceptable. We kind of maintain. However, I would have to add that I like the 5-gallon minimum, because it's just more fun for you to watch your little guy and way more fun for them to roam around. It's going to give them a whole lot more space. I did have a betta in a 3-gallon. Once it was kind of like almost a cube. And once you put aquascaping in there and you have plants that are growing in, they're just going to have less room. But 5-gallon is kind of a good minimum size, I would say. And then Rocky's Pond wants to know good tank mates for emerald rasboras.
Oh, emerald rasboras are great. So for those of you who don't know what emerald rasbora is, basically imagine a galaxy rasbora / celestial pearl danio, but instead of having white, like the star type of spots, it's got vertical stripes. Very, very beautiful fish. Same size. Very similar in terms of their temperament, the way they swim around.
They can be a little shy.
Tank mates, yeah, they're a little, maybe even more so than the galaxy rasboras. But are we looking for tank mates?
Yeah, and that's who I would put. I would like, the next time I keep them, I would like to keep them with CPDs.
Really?
I would, because it would be kind of
you sort of have that, because I think you have a small combo.
Yeah, but they're with so many other ones that you can't really.
Yeah, that's true. If it were me, because of their color, I would opt for either ember tetras or green kubatai. What about, and this is something we've got in the fish room. Oh, that's the other thing too we've got in the fish room right now is clown killies. That would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, it would. Well, because the emeralds, they have kind of like a blue, very pale blue color that I think would look really nice with like a orange or red. Yeah.
Pygmy cory cats would be pretty cool if you got stuff scavenging around.
For sure.
Clown pleco for your cleanup. If you want some kind of a centerpiece sort of fish, maybe a honey gourami would work. Peacock gudgeons would work depending on the size tank. Yeah, but that's a cool fish. Keep the big thing with the emerald dwarf rasbora, like most of the smaller rasboras, is keep them in as large a group as you can. So if you got a 10-gallon, you could easily do 8 or 10 of them, and I would maybe even 12. And I would recommend doing that. The larger the group you have, the less likely they're going to be skittish. But if you've only got 3 or 4, and a couple of them take off the back of the tank every time you walk up, you're very rarely going to see them. Lucas, thank you so much for the super chat. My red cherry shrimp. Elo by us. I don't even know how to say that. I've never even heard it. I'm sorry. Hold on. Now it's skipping around. Elo biopsidae. I have several generations. Was told to infuse the food with malachite green, but I am worried it will ruin my tank. Any suggestions? I am so sorry. I have never dealt with that in my life. I would say for that type of a question, they're the two people that there's actually Andy. I don't know, Andy Rink, if you're still here, if that's something you've dealt with. If not, Garden of Eder. Almost guaranteed he's probably dealt with it. Flip Aquatics has probably dealt with it. I have never dealt with that problem in cherry shrimp ever, so I don't have a first clue on how to treat it. But now, just generally speaking, food infused with malachite green, again, it's not something I've done. I've used food infused with metronidazole, but that's a very different situation. Malachite green, I don't know if the shrimp consume that, what concentration is going to be lethal. Generally speaking, malachite green is invertebrate safe. It's in some of the ick meds, they're like, hey, you can put this in there and your invertebrates should be okay. But once you start infusing it in the food, you got to be really careful now, because whatever drug you use that's added to water becomes a lot more effective and a lot more powerful if it's winding up in food and then ingested by whatever is consuming it. So, yeah, I wish I had more information for you. Hopefully someone here has dealt with that before, but I have not.
Zen Ginger is in the house.
What's up? What's up? Glad you're here.
Hello, J&J. I'm late. And howdy, chatty people. About 100 of you haven't hit the like yet. Make better choices.
Oh my gosh. The Zen is like, man, just calling it out.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
We love you.
It's so funny.
That's why you're here, keeping it real. Too funny. Let's see here. Jasek says, trying to get lower dark water, low pH aquarium. How many almond leaves or other I need for 75 gallon? What is the most effective?
Melanie.
Yeah, Melanie, you here?
Melanie.
How you want to outfit that 75? So start slow, especially when you're trying to mess with pH. By the way, if you've got Chicago water, I don't think the almond leaves are going to do it. You're going to need, if you're trying to lower pH, you're going to need some RO water, right? I know a lot of people say, oh, just put peat in there, or just add cholla wood, or add catappa leaves, or Indian almond leaves, and that will work for people who have a low KH. But if your KH is not low, and if it's Chicago water like ours, it's not. And so you can add all that stuff in there, and you would have to add so much that once you overcome the buffering capacity of Chicago water, now your pH is probably just going to crash, and you're going to have so much stuff in there, it's going to be, you won't even be able to see whatever's in there. So probably the better way to do what you're trying to do is start adding with water changes. Like, okay, I'm going to do a 50% water change today, but 10% of the water I add back is going to be RO. My guess is that's going to, eventually what you're going to do is you're going to take your KH from whatever it is. I'm assuming it's an 8, a 10, a 12, somewhere in there. And you're going to get that down into the mid single digits, 4 or 5. And then when you start adding those catappa leaves, the cholla wood, slowly you might start to see a little bit of a drop in pH, because that KH won't be buffering your higher pH. But that's what I would do. But everything you do, slow over time, have patience. It might take you a couple months to get some stability, because ultimately that's what you want, right? You want to get to a point where you know with every water change, if I do a 50% water change now to maintain the KH where I want it, 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there, I've got to do a 50-50 RO to tap. And then I also know if I have a certain number of catappa leaves, I started slow, add a little bit more, that I can maintain a pH in maybe the upper 6s or something like that.
All right. Whoops World, Joanna, longtime listener. First time commenter. Why'd my first long time ago betta live 7 years in a vase with no air or heat, and now my bettas die at 1 or 2 years in heated, aerated 14-gallon tanks? Yep. That's because they're getting worse and worse. They're just so overbred, and wouldn't you say?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I think bettas are one of the most overbred, genetically poor fish that we have today in the aquarium hobby. I just think there are way too many people out there mass breeding bettas that are coming from lines where, quite frankly, they don't even care. And mass producing them, you're getting them in by the hundreds of thousands, if not, well, probably millions every year. And they wind up in a cup. They're stressed out from shipping. Genetics are poor as it is. You stick them in a tank, and even with the best possible environment, that's not going to stop them from getting the tumors and all the other issues. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you've cut back on bettas just in general.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Because it's just too many of them. Got really funky things going on, and it's sad. Matthew says, do you have other pets other than aquatic kind? Yeah, we do. We've got 2 dogs, Rocky and the Goobs. The Goobs, otherwise known as Gracie, but she's
Gracie Elizabeth.
She is, well, when she was sold to us at the place, the people said she was an English bulldog.
Right.
I think we had our doubts from the beginning,
yeah,
but the price was right, and and she was the tiniest runt,
and she was so cute.
Yeah, and so we think that she's half English bulldog and probably half
Boston. I call her a Boston bulldog.
Yeah.
She totally looks like a Boston with a little bit of English bulldog.
Yeah, And she's chunky.
And she's really small.
Yep.
She's like 35 pounds. For an English bulldog, she's...
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So, and then Rocky is an American bulldog. And
we have the royal family.
Yep. Other than that, right now, that's it. Fish and 2 dogs.
Fish and 2 dogs.
Yeah, at one point, we had some ball pythons. We had some leopard geckos. We had what did Luke have? The skink?
Yeah.
That was a pretty cool little dude. And maybe a couple other lizards at some point. But right now, it's just the dogs and the fish.
But you know what? Mud skippers. Mud skippers. If I could have like a tiny turtle, tiny little frogs, those interest me. Like African dwarf frog. Oh yeah, that's right,
yeah.
Tina.
Yeah, but we had a tortoise for a while. The guy who bred him was like, hey, Eli was like, oh, I want this tortoise. I'm like, so the plan, we did have a long-term plan, and that was we were going to build this big pen in the garage, and it was going to be cool. Well, if you saw our garage, you would have probably realized, wow, you got a lot of stuff you're going to have to move around. This is going to be we would have heated it and made sure that it was proper. Well, that never happened. And Tina started getting, Tina was this big, and then as tortoises do, they grow. And then she spent a while at your dad's house, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, my dad really liked it. He would talk to her
He's
all the
older,
time.
and it was nice to have. And then eventually realized, all right, what are we going to do with Tina? Because either we got to get the pen, or we're going to have to move. So we wound up giving her to the person who bred her, and she is in a massive yard and a barn, living the good life.
Yeah, he was happy to have her back.
Yep. Let's see, what do we got here? Dave says, I love American Bulldogs. Our old dog, Toby, was an American Bulldog mix. Yeah, American Bulldogs, at least ours, was pretty crazy when he was younger. But then once he hit the chill out button,
was crazy.
Probably
2 years old?
Yeah, a couple years ago at least. Oh my gosh, he's been an outstanding dog. The only dog that, I hope he's not listening, we had an Italian Mastiff before him, and he didn't live very long, unfortunately. He was like 5.5. But my gosh, that dog, when he was one of those dogs where he didn't keep him on a leash outside, and he would just kind of hang out and just sit there by you, and then he would walk down the driveway a little bit, and then he knew he'd get about maybe 15 feet away from me. He just kind of looked like, all right, this is about as far as I'm allowed to go, right? And I just be like, come on. And he'd come walking back, like, okay, I got 15 feet away. That was pretty fun.
But he drooled more.
No, I disagree. He drooled more when he drank water, but he did not drool.
He always drooled. He would just be sitting there.
Always. No.
Drooling.
No. Nope.
You just don't remember that.
No, you misremember.
Oh, I remember it. Ugh.
She misremembers.
Let's see. Wait, there was a good suggestion here. Dr. JT, if you're looking for long-lasting bettas, try to go for wild types. They'll live for much longer too. Yep. I had the Mahachai once, and I really liked them. Yep. I really liked them, and you can keep multiples in a tank too.
Sean says, first-time poster. Not like a Whips World first-time poster, like a legit first time. I have a 40-gallon tank, canister filter, and power head. Animals, 2 peacock gudgeons, 4 ember tetras, 2 otos, 3 amano shrimp, 1 to 20 cherry shrimp. That's cool. 40-gallon, you got a lot of space there, so you've still got some room to play with. You could probably add another 8, 10 embers. That would look pretty sweet. You could add another 5 or 6 otos. The amano shrimp are great. 20 cherry shrimp, heck yeah. I mean, the 20 cherry shrimp with that group. The peacock gudgeons will pick off some of those shrimplets for sure.
Well, if you got those, how about some honey gourami?
Or even, I guess, honey gourami would be okay with the shrimp.
They're good.
I was going to say dwarf gourami in a 40, but not with the shrimp.
No.
Or sparkling gouramis, that would be cool too. They might pick off some shrimp babies though. Moby says, what's the oldest fish in the fish room? A Raphael cat. He is probably, I don't know, 13, 15 years old, something like that. Still going strong, still eating like a crazy man every time it's time to eat. Yeah. Want to see drool from the water bowl, get an English Mastiff.
Oh, I bet.
That was one of the things when I did the research. When I do research on dogs, I don't want an excessive amount of drool, just like when they're just sitting there. And Mac didn't do that. And I don't like a lot of dog hair. So we went through we had a Chow at one point, and then we had a Chow Pit Bull mix. And the Chow, oh my gosh, you could brush that dog until your arm fell off. You could have a massive pile of hair, and you would think, you'd feel so accomplished until like 2 days later, you're like, I gotta do this again.
Yeah.
And so I think I got dog groomer's elbow, and I was like, all right, I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. Whipswirl says, mine is a starry night. Definitely a bucket list fish. Yeah, those are cool.
They are.
Very cool thing. So someone's talking about bucket list fish. Love it. Oh, hold on a second here. Lost a lot of fish due to something that looks like ick. Was running a filterless aquarium for a few months, put the sponge filters back in to clear the water, added Paragard. If it is ick, then, like I said, my go-tos are, if it's a planted tank, ick X or fix ick will work. If it's non-planted, you're not worried about invertebrates, and you've got a more serious issue, Copper Safe can do the job. Lately, especially with the stuff that we're bringing in, I've gravitated more towards the Copper Safe, because if the ick situation happens, it can be pretty aggressive, and so it's a much more potent sort of medication. But your beneficial bacteria can take a beating and say goodbye to shrimp, snails, and plants hate it. Although Malaysian trumpet snails don't seem to care about that either. So, what you got?
I just had it. Oh, Lucas wants to know, what fish will you bring to the QC swap that I should put in my empty 10-gallon?
Oh, we've got lots of options for an empty 10. We got the Mira Rasbora.
The orange rice fish.
Orange rice fish would be another one. I'll probably be bringing some chili Rasboras, green neons. What else? Clown killies.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
Forgot about those. And possibly some green kubatai. Yeah, I think that's...
Lots of choices.
Got some choices there, for sure.
Stuff.
Dave's keeping track. He said 13 more likes to 200. He did have that goal. You guys can make that happen for Dave. He doesn't ask for a lot. He just has some goals in life. And tonight, that goal is to see 200 likes. I think we can make that happen. Rachel says, if it looks like... That's what you were going to say, too. If it looks like ick on my betta, but isn't ick, what else could it be? Could be bacterial infection. The nice thing is most of the external parasites, if you throw ick meds in there, often it will take care of it as well. And then you've got anything bacterial, the Maricin 2. I use them in combination almost always. I very rarely ever just use one anymore. I usually just do them both, because between both of those meds, it usually kills just about everything.
Do you know anything about riffle shrimp?
No.
Me neither, but they sound fun.
They sure do.
Almost as fun as the bamboo, the fan shrimp.
Yep. Tom says, how crucial is aqua soil versus just using root tabs? What say you?
I usually do the root tabs.
That was a great response.
That was an intro. Like, well, let me see here. I prefer the root tabs. That's just me. Aqua soil is kind of it's just really fluffy and doesn't hold the plants down. So typically you want to cap it with something like sand. It's just an extra step that I usually don't do. But depends how many plants you're going to have in there. I did have the aqua soil in my farm tank.
Yep. And now
all my crypts. Right?
And now it's a quarantine tank. So can I interject real fast?
Please.
I personally am not a huge fan of the aqua soils and all that stuff. I know they have their place. I know a lot of them, they do make a difference. But you just dump that stuff in there. Was that the Fluval stratum?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that's in there. And I cannot stand that stuff because I can't really gravel vac it. And now it's a quarantine tank. And so the problem, of course, is if you switch the purpose of the tank, I should have just taken that out of there and put sand in it. But I didn't, and now I'm dealing with that. So I like, to me it's more versatile just to use the root tabs. And I don't know is there really that big of a difference? Like, did you notice that much of a difference when you used the Fluval stratum compared to a tank where you just loaded up the root tabs?
No.
At least for the plants that we're keeping.
Yeah, I don't go crazy. Probably if you are, doing a really high-end scape with tons of plants, like really heavily planted, you may just want to do that. Yeah.
Brandon, thank you so much for the super chat. Love your guys' channel. First time commenter. That's awesome. Thanks for being here. Can you mix multiple geophagus, or is it better to just have a school of a single species? 75-gallon stocking ideas. I personally, in a 75-gallon, would prefer to have one type. Could you potentially keep multiples together? Yes, but anytime I've done that, usually if I've got multiple males, they're going to probably spar for space anyway. And it just seems like if it's one species of geophagus, they tend to figure out their issues a little bit easier than if, like, let's say I'm in a 75, I've got Topos, I've got Wine Milleri, I've got Steindachner, I've got a Brasiliensis in there. That sometimes goes bad. Where if it were me and I'm doing a 75-gallon, I'd probably go with the geophagus Topos because they stay a little bit smaller. Could you put slightly larger geophagus in there? Yeah, you could, but I think the Topos would be a really good choice. And then if that's going to be like your show fish, most likely a 75-gallon will probably be able to safely house 2 pairs, one on each side. If you do 5, 6, 7 of them and you let them grow up and all of a sudden you've got a couple pairs, you might have to remove the other ones because maybe they're going to get pushed around a little bit. But they were never super aggressive. Even in the 55-gallon I had, when I had a group of 6, I had one very well-established pair, and they kind of pushed the other 4 to the other side of the tank, but they weren't super aggressive about it. There was no fin nipping. If you go back and look at the species profile, or you look at some of the fish room tour videos I did around that time when I had them in that tank, they were never torn up because they weren't overly aggressive. But some of the larger geophagus sometimes will be a little bit more so. If I'm doing that tank, a 75-gallon, you got your roseline sharks, which would be really cool. Get a group of those, like 6 or 7 of the roseline sharks. You could do something like snakeskin barbs. I've got those in a 75-gallon right now. I think I've got like 12 or 15. They look awesome. Awesome. What else could we do in there? I mean, pretty much they leave most of your bottom feeders alone. Like I never had a problem with cory cats or anything like that. They more or less just ignored them. If you really do want them to breed, you got to be careful with your plecos because, depending on the species you pick, if they've got eggs on a surface at night when the lights are off, those plecos will often come in and eat the eggs. So if you're not worried about them breeding, then your clown plecos, all your different types of bristlenose plecos, your blue phantoms, your green phantoms. We've got what do we have? The snowball pleco in one of them, in one of the 75s. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it sure is cool.
Yeah. So you got a lot of options.
Oh, Whipsroll, Schmozel, Hassenpfeffer Incorporated.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, she's passed away.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. Very sad. Hold on. Things just jumped all over the place on me. I know. Shy Savage Cichlids. How many geos would you put in a 40 breeder? Balos? Again, so 40 breeder, if you put multiples in, you're probably gonna wind up with a pair. Most likely, once that pair starts breeding, you're gonna wind up removing the rest. I mean, you could start out with 6. If you get a pair, and if they're too rough on the others, just have a backup plan. Remove them, sell them. They'll probably be a little bit larger. So if you get you get them small right now at about 1.5 inches or 2 inches. They're going to be fine with each other for a fairly long time until they grow up and become a pair, which that could take a couple years. And then if you start having issues, remove the other ones, maybe put another pair in a different tank, or bring them to a pet store, sell them. You'll probably get a decent amount of money. You'll probably, if they're colored up, you're going to get all your original money back, which would be pretty cool. Oh my goodness, Barbara, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. You answered my question last week about shipping a seeded sponge filter and wanted to know how I made out. It was shipped like fish would be, and it was great. My tank cycled in less than a week. That's awesome.
Wow.
Nice. After you said that, I saw somebody on Facebook that showed a picture and was selling them. So maybe it was the same person. I don't know, but that's really interesting to hear. Thank you. Well, thank you for the super chat, and I really appreciate.
Little doggy. Is that a Yorkie?
Yeah, I appreciate the follow up. So, yeah,
Thanks,
my main concern would have been with the bacteria. If it was a heavily seeded sponge, because there's not a ton of oxygen flow, what was going to happen to the microbes in the center? But at least for your stocking, it seemed to work out. Well, I'm assuming you probably didn't have like a full on just set up a 20. Here's 25 fish in there right away, but probably based on the way that you did it and the microbes that were viable, worked out pretty good. So that's really cool to hear. That's nice. I'm glad people are doing that's a smart idea. So people who are doing that, in fact, hey, the big thing is, and it sounds like it worked out okay, if you've got a tank where you can seat sponge filters the way that we're talking here, and it's a disease-free tank, and you can ship those out, that's going to save some people some issues for sure.
Cheryl, I was wondering where you were at. You were very quiet. She says, dang, shortly after the stream started, I had to help the family with something. It sounded like such a fun topic tonight, too. I'll have to catch the replay. As always, thanks for the live stream. Hopefully your issue worked out well, and your family is well. And, thanks for, checking back with us.
Live show says, I can't seem to bring cherry shrimp home from my local store without them going into shock and or dying before I get home. Any tips?
Well,
that's really strange.
Yeah.
One thing you could do is check the water parameters, make sure that there isn't like a pH crash, but gosh, I mean, if they were fine in the tank and then all of a sudden they're dying, I mean, could it be that there's a major temperature change? Is it a long drive home? For some, if your fish store is an hour away or an hour and a half away, as it is for some people, I guess temperature change could be a thing, but normally, especially if it's Neocaridina shrimp, they don't mind being in the 60s. So even if the tank was it was 75 or in low 70s and it drops a little bit, as long as it's not super fast, they usually do okay. So part of that could be, I would go back to your pet store and say, hey, how long have you had these cherry shrimp here? Where'd you get them? Because if you got them from, we were talking about before, if you got them from overseas and they were, maybe they were having some issues and they might have been on their way out anyway. And it's not anything that necessarily was the shipping or the transport home. It just caused them a little extra stress and it just sped up something that was going to happen anyway.
Moby said it was unanimous, Cheryl. Everyone said snails were better than shrimp. Really? That's what you got out of it, huh?
Wow, there's some
fighting words.
Yep, I think so. Tom, thank you so much for the super chat. Your videos are major, sincere, and helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it. We try. We do. Second floor. Thank you so much for the super chat. Hey, Jason and Joanna, so glad the package got you guys. You both are so nice and help so many of us in the hobby grow our knowledge and enjoy it. Thanks for everything. Well, no, thank you, because we are better dressed, better fed, and we've got better household decorations now because of you. So thank you. Really
Happy holidays, y'all. Yep. That's what it said.
Yeah. Thank you.
Texas friends.
Sid says, could I breed... hold on. Pseudomonas signifer peacock gudgeons in the same planted 18-gallon. Well, the peacock gudgeons, you're going to have to remove the eggs. So the question is, what are they going to do to the signifer? I think I would probably try to breed them separately if it were me. I think there's going to be too much chaos, not necessarily chaos, but there's going to be too much competing going on in that tank for them to both concentrate on breeding. And like I said, the peacock gudgeons, once you see that female in there, what I used to do when I was breeding a lot of them is I would use those terracotta watering stakes. The male and female would be in there usually for like a day or so. Female leaves, male guards the eggs. I would take my phone with the flashlight. I would always make sure that cave was facing out front. Look in there. I'm like, all right, he's got the eggs. I know I've got about 8 or 9 days before those bad boys need to come out. And so then I would wait that 8 or 9 days. I would take that cave, bye-bye male, take him. Sometimes you got to like get him out of there because he's like wedged himself in there and he's fanning the eggs. I would then take a butter knife. I know people are like, oh my gosh, butter knife, you probably destroyed some of the eggs. Yeah, I probably did, but usually we would get hundreds of fry. So I would just scrape them out, put them in an egg tumbler, and tumble them. And then once they hatched and the little egg sacs were there, I would put them in a 10-gallon and feed them very, very tiny food. But that's how I would roll with that.
All right, Whip pointed out a question from Lee. Let's see here. 75-gallon, heavily planted, 11 weeks, stable. Mid-November illness, Mian tank. Okay. Let's see. I hope everybody's feeling better here. 18 fish dead, 5 angels and 2 electric blue acara, 3 swords survived, 12 red-eye tetras new, are 8 to 12 Cory, and 2 bristlenose plecos okay.
So we lost the swords,
18 fish dead,
the angels, electric blue acara, and most of the other stuff survived. With something like that, when you've only got certain fish impacted, so first of all, if the angels were very, very tiny, they are not all, they don't necessarily do all that well with new situations. They can be, it's very common to lose these dime or nickel sized angelfish. They're so cute at the pet store. They're relatively cheap, but I don't necessarily have the best luck buying that size angel from a pet store. If it's a breeder, I have better luck, but even then it can be touch or go. Electric blue acara, usually fairly hardy, but even again, if they were on the smaller side, the question is, with that, did this problem just happen, or did it happen a while back? Because if it happened a while back, there might have still been some kind of ammonia spike. And then the other thing too is, once fish start to die, if they started to die more rapidly, it doesn't take a lot of fish to wind up having an ammonia spike. So that could definitely contribute to additional fish, especially those angelfish starting to go. At this point, you know your tank is well cycled, most likely at 11 weeks, and the rest of the fish seem to be stabilized. So that's a heavily planted tank.
Yeah.
So now, and if there were any new fish that came in, like if you added some fish and the angelfish were already there, the electric blue acara were there, and you added something else, sometimes they can bring in a bacterial infection that wipes out fish that haven't been exposed before.
There's a correction here, and I probably read it totally wrong if I totally massacred it. I'm sorry, Lee. He says, no, 13 serpe, 1 angel, 2 clown pleco, and 2 platy died in November.
Oh, okay. All right. In November. Got it. Yeah, I see here. Okay. Yeah, clown plecos are another one that can be a little bit sensitive. So if at the time there was any ammonia nitrite, it could easily wipe those fish out. And then since that time, obviously everything is probably stabilized now, and there's no ammonia, no nitrite. You've got registrable nitrate. So it might have been a cycling thing. It might have just been, hey, you brought some new fish in, it wiped out the other ones with some type of parasite, and now everybody's got immunity to it, and we have a better situation. So that's kind of what I would think. All right, everybody. Holy cow. This is the longest live stream we've done in a very long time. We went way past our time. So
yeah, fishy business.
I think we're going to call it a night because it's getting late and y'all probably have to go to work in the morning. So we want to respect your time. But thank you. Thank you to our moderators, Dave and Oink, and I thought Wendy was here. And thank you for all the super chats and everything. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all the questions. We'll be back next Wednesday, same time, same place. Bring your questions. Think about them. Write them down. Have them ready for us next Wednesday, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. And we will see you all next week. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.